Some magic is not meant to be touched. Some power does not belong to this world. And sometimes, all it takes is one mistake. A banished sorcerer, a fading world, and magic that is slowly dying. Cosmo walked on, his thoughts returning to Karolik's warning. Magic was fading, thinning, slipping through even the most disciplined grasp. Karolik had spoken of it with unusual gravity, referencing older failures, things best left buried. A banished sorcerer, a warning, he had called it. The thought lingered, and yet he could not shake the feeling that he was no longer walking alone. As it often did, that feeling drew him toward questions he had long avoided. His mother's careful silences, the things she would never explain, and the one absence that had always remained. His father. Gone before he was born. Cosmo reached the restaurant and entered. It was a quaint little restaurant, run by a slight human female with black hair and a cook that was a half-elf. He sat himself down and, smiling, waved to the woman at the counter.
"Hey, Cosmo, the usual?"
The woman asked. Cosmo nodded.
Sure thing, Bev, and add a saucer of milk.
Sending a smug smile to the ginger cat at the entrance. Kathrine bristled with annoyance. How had he sensed her? And worse, he'd ordered a saucer of milk for her, as if she were that kind of cat. She should have turned around and left him to his arrogance, but curiosity tugged harder than pride. Fine. She entered the restaurant and shapeshifted into her humanoid form. A foggy haze obscured her transformation. When the mist faded, she stood there radiating irritation. Auburn hair pulled into a tight ponytail, green slit-pupiled eyes fixed on Cosmo with cool precision. Her cat ears flicked sharply, and her orange tail lashed behind her. Every part of her stance made it unmistakably clear that she was not amused. Cosmo watched the transformation with curiosity. He watched her pass her hands over her clothing and then sent him an irritated gaze. Cosmo had a cat growing up, and he had healthy respect, knowing when not to push too much. He could tell by the tail twitching that this shapeshifter was annoyed, but he could not help himself.
Milk not enough?
He asked. Kathrine's voice purred dangerously.
Coffee with cream. You can keep the saucer.
The corner of Cosmo's mouth twitched upwards into a modest smile as he raised his arm to get the attention of Bev.
Just a coffee with cream for the young lady. No need for the saucer.
He turned back to Kathrine with open curiosity.
Well, Kat, do you have a name?
Kathrine rolled her eyes upward, briefly cursing whatever impulse had inspired her parents.
Kathrine,
she said flatly. Cosmo's smile widened, as if he were restraining a laugh.
So, Kat wasn't far off.
You have no idea how often I've heard that.
She growled under her breath. Cosmo leaned back, hands lifted in mock surrender, a grin tugging at his lips.
No need to bite me.
He paused, eyes glinting.
Yet.
Kathrine narrowed her gaze, her ears flicking back in warning. The man was insufferably arrogant, and annoyingly, not unattractive. His fedora now rested on the table, revealing a tumble of dark, shaggy hair that framed his pale features. She studied him, trying to ignore the strange pull that kept her rooted in the seat. Something about him beckoned. The warmth of the moonstone in her pocket pulsed gently, reminding her of why she'd stayed. He was an apprentice wizard, and perhaps he could tell her what the stone truly was, and what it was worth.
Cosmo, is it?
she asked. Cosmo nodded.
Cosmo Barathers, at your service. Apprentice to the wizard Karalik.
Bev returned and placed a plate of eggs and ham in front of Cosmo and placed a cup of coffee and a side cup of cream in front of Kathrine.
Anything else?
She asked. Cosmo shook his head and then looked at Kathrine, who also shook her head.
No, this will do fine.
Kathrine poured the cream into the coffee. She looked at Cosmo for a moment, trying to gauge him, before reaching into her pocket and taking out the moonstone.
Do you know what this does and its worth?
Cosmo was placing a piece of ham into his mouth as he looked at the moonstone. He thoughtfully chewed on the ham as he felt the magic emanating from the moonstone.
So that is what I felt from you in the shop.
He stated after swallowing the ham. Kathrine frowned. She did not have any ability to sense magic. She would have to be careful in the future to carry magical dampening cloth with her. Cosmo placed his fork down and reached for the moonstone. He felt the warmth of the stone caress his palm as he looked at it. Kathrine impatiently queried.
Well?
Patience, little cat.
He murmured. Kathrine grimaced with annoyance with his familiarity. Cosmo let his mind drift as he stared at the stone, tracing the lines in the rune itself with his index finger. Odd, he thought. The magic that was coming from this stone was different than what he had encountered before. His finger continued tracing the rune, and curiously, the moonstone became warmer. Kathrine sipped from her coffee cup, her green eyes gazing over the lip of the cup as she considers Cosmo. The man needs some sun, was her immediate thought. High cheekbones, a nose that must have been broken in the past as it had a slight twist to the left. Gray eyes under thick black eyebrows. Full lips and even teeth. Strong chiseled jaw with short stubbles of a beard and mustache enhancing the lightness of his skin. Not bad looking at all. She clamped down on that thought. This was just finding out the worth of the stone. Cosmo looked up from examining the stone, catching her studying him. The corner of his lips tilted upwards in a small smile.
Like what you see?
Kathrine rolled her eyes upwards, gave an exasperated sigh, and a shake of her head.
Really? You are pretty sure of yourself.
With a shrug, Cosmo placed the moonstone back on the table. The runes on the stone began glowing. Cosmo's gray eyes widened as the glow became shards of light swirling around them.
What the fuck?
Exclaimed Kathrine. The room around them began to spin. Or were they spinning? Kathrine wasn't sure. The moonstone in the center of the table was the focal point. The room was revolving around the two of them. Faster and faster the room blurred as Kathrine reached over the table and grabbed hold of Cosmo. Sparks flew. Suddenly, there was a horrendous thunderclap of sound and a blinding flash of light. Bev was returning from the kitchen and glanced at the table where Cosmo was with the cat shapeshifter and noticed that they were not there. She shrugged and walked over to the table and frowned. Normally, Cosmo would have left money on the table. All that was on the table was a half-eaten plate of eggs and a half-full cup of coffee. She looked around, but there was no sign of them. She sighed. Cosmo was a regular, so she will need to berate him next time she saw him. She cleared the table and deposited the dishes into the dish bin. She will take them back to the kitchen later and moved off to look after other customers.
If you want to see where these roads lead, make sure to subscribe. There's more to this story than they were ever meant to uncover.